Hello, this is Barbara Ann Rosenberg, your roving reporter. And today we're going to the beautiful country, Central American country of Guatemala. Guatemala is just south of Mexico, very mountainous, very exotic, beautiful countryside, wonderful food to eat in the mountains and by the sea, and lovely handcrafts, very warm and friendly people, and I hope you're going to enjoy it. Oh, the antiquities, the archaeological sites are simply spectacular. You're going to see Tikal, which is over 1,000 years old and has 18 and 21-story buildings. Come along, I think you'll enjoy it. We're now at the very beginning of the National Park of Tikal, one of the great, probably the greatest of the Mayan centers. It's from the classic period, meaning about 300 to 900 AD. So it's quite a while ago that these guys built these ruins, which are now ruins, but evidently really spectacular. Walk along with us. We'll go in. It's amazing that anybody ever found them, though. This Tarzan-like jungle that surrounds it certainly would have put me off unless somebody put a... This is a plan of Tikal. You can see what an extensive city it was, probably the major city in all of the Mayan world. I'm standing in the Grand Plaza, and it is grand, of Tikal, which is probably the most magnificent of the Mayan restorations. This is in Guatemala, and this huge structure at the end is about the equivalent of an 18-story building. It was built without the wheel, without any beasts of burden, all by human hand, more than 1,000 years ago. This, I guess, was in the period of 300 to 900 AD, and we have so many things to look at here. We're going to show you many of them, and it's particularly fascinating when you think of what life must have been like at that time, over 1,000 years ago. The city was supposed to have been about 50,000. They're not quite sure of why it disappeared. They don't know whether there was a plague. They really don't have any idea. It is deep in the jungle, and I mean a jungly jungle, a Tarzan jungle, where there are both howler and spider monkeys living, and about 300 kinds of birds, the most exotic trees. It's the most incredible. You have to walk a long way to get here to this great plaza. It's probably a couple of kilometers in from the main plaza, down where there are hotels, about 3 of them. Nothing really to write home about, although there are a couple that are acceptable. We'll talk about those at another time. Standing here next to a stela, a huge stone, showing a Mayan king in full regalia. See his huge headdress, marvelous clothing. These guys lived pretty well. You understand they had not figured out the use of the wheel, even though they had round stones. They did not use the wheel in building all of this, as I said, or beasts of burden. But they had this very, very complicated calendar, which is as fine and as refined as our calendar. And they had figured out the mathematical concept of zero. They have not been able to decipher all the hieroglyphics on these stones, these stela that are surrounding us, but they have been able to decipher enough so that they know that, there is a written language. They can't figure it all out yet. Nevertheless, very, very fascinating here deep in the middle of the Guatemalan jungle. We're looking at a pyramid that has not been excavated. all you see is the top that's been done, and the bottom is in the state in which people found it about 150 years ago when they first came through. It's interesting to note that the University of Pennsylvania was highly instrumental in the excavation of Tikal, this marvelous city here in Guatemala. The pyramid to the right of that unexcavated one is pretty badly damaged, but I suppose any of us would be in 1,000 years of being out in this kind of climate. But see, the top is not complete. The bottom is. I don't think I'm going to try to climb that one. Of course, I'm not going to try to climb any of them. There's yours. This is a species of wild turkey that grows in this area of Tikal. It's an endangered species, so you can't hunt for them anymore, but you can certainly look at them. They're beautiful to look at. They make a lot of noise the first thing in the morning, and they fly around here almost like tame birds. It's a good thing that they're protected, otherwise I'm sure lots of them would end up on people's dinner tables. Tell me when. This is tomb number 116, found inside the pyramid of the giant jaguar. The jaguar is still roaming these jungles, and it is very much considered a representation of a deity by the Mayas. This is obviously a king with all his jade and shells and pottery, but that's the way they disposed of their dead, and I'll show you some other things, some beautiful things out of tomb 116 as we walk over to another window. These are ceramics with, again, semblances of the jaguar head on them, and very sophisticated, from a period of about 13 to 1500 years ago, maybe a little longer than that even. But We're in Livingston, a part of Guatemala on the Caribbean Sea that is very different from most of the rest of Guatemala, which is very, very Indian. Here they have a big Caribe influence. People who have come from the Caribe stock, who have been in the islands for years and years. And we came over from Puerto Barrios on the mainland to Livingston in a boat like this, in a launch like this. There are bigger ones as well, but this is the kind of launch we came over in. And we came to this beautiful area just to relax for a few days before we go get into the highlands of Guatemala, which is terribly and not terribly, but totally Indian, and we're going to see some fascinating things. But in the meantime, let's enjoy Livingston and its glories. And walking away from the dock, we come upon little tiny holes in the wall, so-called restaurants, where this place, as a matter of fact, just has excellent empanadas, Café Los Almendros, and then you go from this very tiny little places to a grand and glorious hotel up on the hill called the Tucan du Gu. Yes. I'm standing here and talking with Styla, who was our boatman on the way over from Puerto Barrios.
No, Livingston.
Now we're in Livingston, yes. Livingston, yes. You live in Livingston?
Yes, I'm living here. Don't worry.
Where does your family come from?
Well, yes, my family is from here. It's good guys.
Good guys.
Good guys.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah. Yes, indeed. You get a sense of what Livingston is all about. This gentleman's family has been here for how long?
What?
How long?
How long? How many family?
How many years?
8. 8 family.
8 family.
8
okay.
family. Mm-hmm.
Yes. No. No. This is obviously the wood of choice that people use for doing their cooking. You walk through the town and the whole place smells like a smokehouse. These little stores, tiendas as they're called, are very typical of Livingston and really actually throughout the area here. And this across the street is the supermarket, the supermercado. It isn't exactly like Acme, but you can see they have a lot of things, and it's really quite much larger, and There's no people here yet. They're just coming out of church. It's Sunday in Livingston. We're looking out over the Caribbean Sea from the east coast of Guatemala. That's generally not what you think of when you think of the Caribbean. You think of one of the islands. We're here at the Hotel Toucan du Gout, named for the toucans, obviously, and it's right here in the middle of this very African-influenced area. Very beautiful, very lush, and very tranquil. I think you can see this family over here to my left, and they look quite happy and relaxed, as everybody else does here in this part of the world. You can see how blue the sky is. Right now, this time of day, there are no clouds, but early in the morning and at night it really poured last night, and yet it clears away to be perfectly gorgeous during the day. It's a... Yeah. We're standing here on a little tropical island, which is about as tropical an island as anyone could ever find. The hotel covers the whole island. It's the Hotel Catamaran, and it's these large palapas that are made of palm fronds, and as you can see, around the edge of the this area where the Lake Isabel empties into the Rio Dulce, there are other buildings also with these roofs made of palm fronds. It's a haven for sailors who come here from all of the islands and put in because it's such a sheltered harbor. Look at the water traffic around here. It's simply beautiful. We're standing in one of the palapas. One is the dining room and one is the gathering place for the end of the day. There are even 2 televisions here, unusual for this part of the world. They have their own dish. This is owned by an American and his wife, and they do run a very charming hotel. The American Embassy crowd was here for the weekend, so you get the idea of and now there's a group of Germans, and we're here. It's a very international little place. Charming. A boat from Toronto made it all the way down here. Boy, that's a long trip. I sure wouldn't care to be on it. We are now in Hacienda de los Sanchez, the premier steakhouse in Guatemala City. And I'm going to tell you what, you may not think of Guatemala as a steak country, but this is superb. You can see the steaks here, you can see the plates, the chickens, the steak, the shrimp are as big as this. It's all absolutely wonderful, and it's all served with different, very flavorful sauces. It's a great excitement here in this lovely place, and you can watch the cooks at work. Ooh, come in and see these steaks, Bob. Will you come in close and see the steaks? They taste as good as they look, too. We've moved from the lowlands of the Caribbean up here to Antigua, which is a colonial town in the home of the Duflon collection of Guatemalan textiles. And as you can see, I'm standing in a most gorgeous garden with a jacaranda tree behind me and all kinds of beautiful flowers around us. We're going inside and take a look at some of the pieces of the collection, and I'll tell you a little bit about the town after we leave the house here. Typical colonial antique house. The whole town is protected, I think, by UNESCO, and it's just absolutely magnificent in the shadow of 2 or 3 volcanoes, and we'll look at those as we're in the Henry Duflon home collection, the most extensive collection of textiles in Guatemala. And Guatemala is known for its magnificent textiles, different from every one town to another. We'll see more of them as we go from village to village. Standing with me here is Deborah Duflon, whose father originally started collecting these materials about 30 years ago. And as you can see, is quite extensive. Some of it goes to the United States from time to time. That's where he is now. And the curator is there in Connecticut giving a show. So let's take a fast look from this pile of gorgeous fabrics over here to one very specific piece that's really quite a showpiece and is all being set up for display. You want to walk over here and take a look at it?
Well, here in Antigua, in Doña Luisa's restaurant, we usually have an exhibit at the entrance, and we change it periodically. This is the, this time I'm setting up a show of patsum. We have here, this is the old style huipil with the silk embroidery, and this is more what they use now of a huipil embroidery on the collar. This is a paya, which is used for ceremonial purposes. And there's women's belts and a man's belt here. And this will be on exhibit over there. And every month or so we change the exhibit. So
we are now in someplace very special for Philadelphians. We're at the restaurant called El Cappuccino, and it's owned by Frankie Cicciarelli.
Franco Cicciarello.
Cicciarello. From guess where?
South Philadelphia. Here I am.
And I found him right here in Antigua, Guatemala. And he serves the same kind, better food than they serve in South Philadelphia. I hope everybody doesn't come after me, all my buddies down there in the Mercado and all places. Just a minute. Let's tell them your philosophy in about 10 seconds of how wonderful the food is you serve.
Well, my food, I am the man who eats it first. And if it's no good for me, it should not be served to no one.
Well, I will tell you, we're having a small dish of Frankie fries, he calls them, cooked with garlic. We have some spicy vegetables, and we're having an endive salad. That's before we get to the pasta. We'll come back to you when we get around to the pasta. See you soon. Frankie has talked us in not just to having lasagna, which was divine. I mean better. I better stop saying that. My friends in Philadelphia will stop talking to me. Now we're having shrimp and linguine. And those
garlic sauce.
with garlic sauce.
With the garlic sauce, yes.
And we had some Belgian endive, can you believe, in Guatemala.
And
Look at this.
And this
Look at this.
mortadella. Very, very excellent quality of mortadella. Made in Guatemala. People sometimes hard to believe. And of course here we got also Arpin mozzarella, imported from Wisconsin.
And when I get back to the States, that's the kind I'm going to get. I mean, I'm not advertising for them, but I've got to tell you, it's the kind that goes stretch when you pull on it. Do you use that on your pizzas?
Pizzas, lasagnas, all kinds of dishes for appetizer, and you name it. We got every cheese you can possibly think here.
And that is what happened when I came back. I had eaten here once before. Oops, don't crack up the joint, Frankie. It's only yours. Had eaten here once before when I was here 4 years ago, and I remembered, wrote an article about it, and now we're here to taste it again. Hello. This traditional town of Santiago Atitlan, where the men wear not quite knickers, they're sort of like, what do we call them? Pedal pushers, I think we used to call them. And they're beautifully embroidered, and they have a specific sash that they wear. And the young women, too. Even the little baby over there across the street is wearing what's called a corte, a piece of hand-woven cloth, and they have all this beautiful stuff for... They are little girls in costume. Oh, they disappeared. They don't want to have their picture taken unless we pay them. Down the street, some coming toward us, some going the other direction. They're all in native costume of this Santiago de Atitlan. As you can see, they wear them every day, not just for the tourists. Here's another one of these guys in native dress. They just wear these things every day. Some days there's loads of tourists come in, some days nobody. But I've been over here when there's been not a soul around except little old me, and they were all dressed the same way. In Santiago Atitlan, the women still scrub their clothes on the rocks by the edge of the lake. The men fish in dugout boats that are all made by hand. The clothing they wear every day is made by hand. It's a way of life that's fast disappearing, but all of the handcrafts that they do, they're trying to maintain. Look at this youngster coming up the steps with a head strap, carrying a heavy load. You'd think you were 1,000,000 miles away, and yet you're really fairly close to Guatemala City. So we're here on the banks of Crater Lake, huge Crater Lake, with 3 volcanoes still around it. It's been about 1,000 years. I think I may have said this before since they erupted. But you get the picture of how mysterious the light is over the lake, and the Indians have some reservations about it because it's about 1,000 feet deep and nobody's ever been found who's gone in. They have some superstitions about it. Look how gorgeous this lake is with the very strange blue light. This is about 9:30 or 10 o'clock in the morning. People are just starting on their rounds and doing whatever it is they do at the lake, washing and fishing, and there's a motor launch and some of the little dugout boats, the wooden.
Nuestro Señor Jesucristo, Yashu Hashberger ayuda, Yashu Hashberger sinu colaboración, que chua va mechar pues arela, Dios. Dios va a ser Dios que va a colaborar gente paz. Dios va a ser nuestro Señor Jesucristo que invita a cualquier lal que está limit. Dios es Dios que aquí no na la lluvia que se toma que Dios es claro. Ayuda que goste no co puede ser mucho más toma coche para chua meta. Quien cocino los malos coches, hay malos. Ángela, gracias a Dios, ya que ayuda.
Standing here in the famous Mayan Inn in Chichicastenango in the highlands of Guatemala. And this gentleman has been playing here for, I don't know, 20 some odd years. I don't think he varies the rhythm much. I'm going to hold the mic out and you can hear him. Certainly see him. He's dressed in typical Maya costume. There's a magnificent garden here. Magnificent garden with these parrots and other birds around. As you can see, this exquisite foliage. And into the next courtyard of this superior place to stay. Only 30 rooms, and they maintain the Mayan atmosphere and the Spanish atmosphere in every way possible. We have here some of the Mayan women doing the weaving for which this part of the country is so famous, using the typical lap loom, and of course there are tourists everywhere. This is a market day in Chichicastenango, something that you'll never forget once you see it. We're in the Popol Vuh Museum, Popolvu Museum, which is part of the university here in Guatemala City. We're going to look at the most extraordinary funeral urns that I have ever seen. These are 800 to 1000 BC. The eyes have no expression, and that means they are for dead people. And the people were crouched into a fetal position as they were placed into the urn, and that's the way they stayed. They didn't have coffins as such in those days. These are costumes of the dances that they still perform today. Some of them come from the Mayan period, and incidentally, those funeral jars we saw were, of course, from the Mayan period. These dances are still performed. Some of them have their origins, these early ones in the Mayans, and then as you move around, the later ones have been taken, the masks, as you can see, have very definite Spanish influence. They still go every place from the little farm villages to the big cities. They perform these dances for special occasions today. A little bit of an insight into the lovely country of Guatemala. I hope this gives you some further understanding of what it's like, and perhaps will interest you in coming again. It's my second trip, and I look forward to more yet. See you later.